Καλησπέρα σας. Να σας καλωσορίσω στην απόψινή διάλεξη, ιδιαίτερα τα άτομα που έχουν έρθει από μακριά και χαιρόμαστε πάρα πολύ που σας έχουμε μαζί μας. Θα μου επιτρέψετε να συνεχίσω στα αγγλικά να παρουσιάσω την ομιλήτριά μας. Dear colleagues, dear students, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this evening's lecture by Dr. Erin Gibson, whom I have known for more than 15 years now, since we were both members of the Troodos Archaeological and Environmental Survey Project. So it is a pleasure to have her here give a lecture at the Archaeological Research Unit. Erin studied archaeology at the Department of Archaeology and Anthropology of the Simon Fraser University in British Columbia in Canada. She then crossed over to the Atlantic to continue her studies at the University of Glasgow, where she completed an MPhil in Mediterranean archaeology, and then her PhD with Bernard Knapp and Michael Given as her supervisors. The subject of her thesis was Negotiating Space, Routes of Communication in Roman to British Colonial Cyprus. Her research was supported by a scholarship from the Department of Archaeology of the University of Glasgow. She completed her PhD in 2005 and then undertook a number of postdoctoral projects related to the study of historical landscape. From 2011 to 2013, she undertook a postdoctoral research fellowship at the Department of Anthropology at the University of Northern British Columbia, funded by the Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council of Canada. The topic of her project was the archaeology of movement, reinterpreting interaction in a historical social landscape. This was followed by the project entitled Articulating Heritage in a First Nations Landscape, a community-based approach, but she did not give up on Cyprus. So, her wish to continue the work she did in the framework of her thesis and the TASK project led to the decision to apply for the extremely competitive Marie Sklodowska-Curie Research Fellowships. Her work and research done up to now was duly recognized, and she was successful, so her project entitled Pathways to Heritage, Community Heritage and the Archaeology of Movement in the Adelphi Forest, Cyprus, got funded and was launched in September 2016. Erin has taught at both the University of Glasgow and the University of Northern British Columbia, and she has been very active in community engagement, which has been an important part of both her postdoc research project in Canada and the current Marie Curie project. Erin has presented her work in conferences, scientific journals, and public lectures, and she was kind enough to accept an invitation to give a lecture here tonight. The title of her lecture is Identity, Memory and Belonging, Heritage Work in a Rural Cypriot Village. Erin.
Wonderful. Thank you, Lena, and thank you, Stella, for inviting me to come here today. It's my first time presenting at the research unit. I've gone to many talks here myself over the apparently 15 years now, I suppose. And as Lena said, I have never really given up on Cyprus, and still haven't. I will continue to do research here probably for quite a long time. Now, before I start my discussion tonight, I really want to say some thank yous. And actually, as I say thank you, if I can have even the people who just arrived and are in the foyer, if I can have all the villagers from Nikki, Tari, if you can all stand up so we can acknowledge you, please. Yes, yes, yes. Yes, yes. There are some in the foyer as well. I want to thank you. Say thank you to the mayor of the village of Nikitari, Kyriakos Alexandrou Ropas, who is here tonight. Thank you very much for all of your support and that of your community council over the last 2 years. Actually, it was before that, but we'll get to that later. And all the villagers, the women's group, the youth group, and everyone else who participated and continues to participate in the project that is, as I said, is ongoing. So what I'm going to be talking about tonight, as I say, it is an ongoing project. I have one more year of my Mary Curry project left, but so what I will be presenting tonight are not necessarily conclusions, but things that I'm learning as I go. So I will start off. Okay, so what I'm going to be talking about today is really how people create and recreate the connections to the past through doing something what I call and others have called heritage work. So doing the work of heritage. So this is a different way of looking at heritage. It's not seeing heritage as a thing, but much more of a process of engagement. And I'm going to be giving you some examples of how that's working in the village as we go. And part of this is really looking at how the relationship, how objects have this power, objects and places and practices have this ability to cross-cut time in amazing ways. And through engaging with them, through interacting, through touching them, sometimes you become almost transported back into time. It creates a very emotional way of connecting with the past. And I'm going to be looking at this through a few different activities. So visiting abandoned villages, tending olive trees, and even making pitas. So, and these are tied to the experiences of authenticity. Okay, so I'll be talking about this a bit more as I go through. So to start off with, where is Nikki Tari village? Many of you may know. It's usually passed by quite quickly on the way to Pania Forviotisa Church. So it's in the foothills of the Troodos Mountains. It's outlined here, so not too far from the buffer zone. And just to give you a picture of where this place is, this is, I've taken it from a different view. We're looking into the mountains, so into the Troodos Mountains, so facing south. And the valley, Seenu Valley, comes up this direction here. And this is really the location of Nikki Tari village. So it's really nestled in the foothills, very agricultural, not a very big community, but that's the study area that I have chosen for my Mary Curry project, which I'll talk about now. So a lot of people ask me why I chose Nikki Tari village of all the villages in Cyprus, and part of this is related to my past, as Lena said. I was part of the Troodos Archaeological and Environmental Survey Project, and as part of that, there was survey of the mountainous areas of the Adelphi Forest, and so I had a connection to this landscape, and I continued that connection through my PhD research that was looking at pathways, okay, and communication routes, and it was through this work that I started to talk to villagers, and specifically to a man who unfortunately couldn't make it today because he's out working olives, of course, like many people, Paniotis Lopas. And he became and continues to be a very important person for the research because he grew up in the forest. He has a connection to the places in the forest, and he became he's a large knowledge holder, really is what we would call him. And so I became much more involved in looking in the forest through different eyes, through his help. So I became actually connected to the forest in my own way. So this is the survey project we made. We did transects as it's nothing particularly new in terms of archaeological research at the time. It was, but we all know about transect survey. So I became, through this work, through recording pathways and pitch kilns and resource extraction, I became quite attached to this place. And sometimes I think as researchers, we're not actually allowed to say when we're trying to explain why did you do research in a certain spot. You're not really supposed to say, because I like it. But actually, I do like it. I like Nikki Tari. I've experienced much more philoxenia than I've ever experienced anywhere else. So I'm sticking there for now. So that's part of my attachment to that place. Now, I did my, as Lena said, I started my research in Cyprus, looking at communication routes and understanding landscape. And then I took some time and went back to, once I finished my PhD, I went back to Canada. And there I became part of an anthropology department, which again is very different from an archaeology department. And I started a postdoc research project, and that was working with a First Nations group in the region. If you know Whistler, then you're close to where I was, with the Statlium of the Lower Lillooet River Valley. And it's through working with them that I really realized that heritage is a much more complicated thing than what I thought before. And in fact, I learned things like there's not really any concrete, I mean, with them, there was no concrete separation between past and present. It was all intermingled. Again, this is part of the way that they were looking at the landscape around them. And as part of this research, I had the opportunity to participate in graveyard cleaning. And this is a very practical but also spiritual event where you're cleaning the graves of the ancestors. And it was through doing this that I really realized that the ancestors aren't actually dead in the same way that we know them in other cultures. And it was through this that I realized that people were taking care of the ancestors, that they were actually tending to their well-being and the well-being of the future through actually doing this work. And it was this work, the work of heritage, that made me rethink some of the thoughts that I had before about Cyprus and the work that I did there, and prompted me to come back to Cyprus and start, number one, talking to people within the villages and actually asking them what's important to them. And that's what the nature of the Mary Curry project that I'm doing right now is asking the villagers, what is important to you? It's not necessarily what is important to me, and actually not just asking the question, but listening to the answer. And so this meant that the project that I undertook kind of started, I had ideas that it would be much more archaeological, and it's taken much more of an anthropological view of things, and involved in some different ways, material culture and different ways of looking at the landscape. So I'm very thankful for that. So moving back to Seenu, this view might be one that you will know. It has Pania Forviotasa on the right of your screen. And again, this is looking down the valley towards Nikki Tari village. Nikki Tari village isn't in this shot at all, but it does kind of give you an idea of the landscape, certainly near Nikki Tari village, which is one of, obviously, the forested landscape. Now, if we look at, again, kind of focusing a bit on that area of where the church is, it's a very well-known church, UNESCO church of Pania Forviotasa, and kind of exploring this idea of heritage as work. That heritage is something that we actually do in the present in order to continue to keep connections or build connections with the past. And we can see this by we have kind of the official heritage, which is UNESCO listed heritage of the Seenu church. And then on the other side, you have just up the road the Forviotasa restaurant. So not only do you have here the restaurant is actually named for Viotisa. So the heritage, the place, the importance of the church is in a way being negotiated. It's being used in very dynamic way for the restaurant itself to create a sense of belonging to that place. But also if you go inside the restaurant, you see all sorts of different things happening. And what I really want to focus here on is above the doorways, you'll see stuff. There's boots. There's I know all these things have names that I don't know the names of right now. But the harnesses for horses and donkeys. There's bread baskets. There's all sorts of things above the restaurant, above the doorways of the restaurant. Now, this is another way of negotiating heritage. This is on a different level. These are all items that were from the village and area of Seenu, and it's communicating a certain type of a connection with the past. And if we look at these boots, for example, that's what's outlined in yellow on your screen. Now, these boots do not have any. This is a part of the stories that Panagiotis has told me over the years. These boots do not have any right or left. They're just boots. And this is the amazing thing with something like a pair of boots that is from the past, old boots that are weathered, that have been used, that have experiences tied to them. By seeing them, by holding them, by being near them, that proximity, in fact, can pull you back into time. It has this ability to transcend time and space and bring you back into contact with a previous time. It's this idea of empathy, that you have somehow these objects have the power to connect you, right? Which is why the discourse around authenticity has arisen, is because there's a certain power involved in these, and people have talked about this in terms of an aura or something, a patina, these layers of meaning that are embedded in these objects. But it's an important thing to think about when you think about heritage work, because these objects, and as we'll see now, places and activities do have the ability to transcend time in different ways. They are the part of this work that people do. Now, a part of the Mary Curry project, besides asking villagers what is important to you, it involves working with the local schools. And so this is the Seenu Regional Primary School. And I started a project with them and the teachers at the school to investigate the important places to the children. So part of this was making postcards, pretending that you're sending the child is sending a postcard to someone who's never been to their village before. And what important places are you actually going to put on that card? And through this, and there was 85 students, I think, in the end that participated in this project, and they're from a variety of different villages, so not just Nikki Tari village, but Potami and Vazakia and all the local schools. Through this, it became evident that the children didn't have as much of a connection to their current school as they did their old schools. They would draw pictures of their primary school that would be in the village, because I'm sure, as many of you know, on the village scale, each of the small villages would have their own primary school in the past, and then they were closed because there's not enough students, and then they make these regional schools. So the pictures of the primary schools within the village would appear because that was the place, the festivals, and people would talk, the villagers would talk very fondly about these staying at the school in the village. But it wasn't something that the students were communicating at all. They didn't have a connection to this place. And that was something that was really bothering the school teachers. This isn't good, because it means that our village, that the school isn't part of the village. And in terms of identity, that was a problem. And so this school, its name is Seenu. I think it was chosen for probably political reasons, because they didn't want the school to be named for any of the individual villages. So instead they chose the name of abandoned village of Seenu. Now the teachers proposed to me and said, well, I wonder if there's any way that we can connect the school to the abandoned village of Seenu. And I said, absolutely. So lots of different ways of doing that, because that was one of the places that the task project did work, and one of the places that I know the elders know about, and so I thought this was perfect. And so we started this project, and it happened last week, so it's hot off the presses, as it were. And part of this, connecting the students to the place of Seenu, was an Seenu field trip. And through this field trip, the point of this was to physically get them out there to actually see the village, to walk around the village. And it was an amazing experience, because it was actually the process of them walking. The bus couldn't make it to the village, so they had to walk. So it was the process of walking up the hill, and the teachers trying to keep them into one group desperately. It was about trying to. Paniotis Lopas decided that he would show people around. He agreed to do this, and so he had a whole stack of stories, as he usually does, because he's an amazing storyteller. And so he started by telling these stories. And you can see in this picture that the storytelling, even the video that I'm going to play in a minute, shows the students up and active and listening very carefully. In a lot of cases, the students were sitting down. Some of them decided, because it was taking a little while for him to kind of get to the point of his story, the students were lying down. There were some of them were poking each other with sticks. These are students that are the equivalent to grade 5, grade 6, so maybe between the ages of 9 and 11. But it's that the important thing here is that it's actually it's that physical engagement with the place. On one hand, it's that walking around, it's touching the mud brick, it's tripping over stones. And on the other side, it's actually that community of doing it. It's the act of doing it together. It's the being poked by sticks. It's being told by your teacher to stop misbehaving. All of that is actually part of this process. It becomes part of what they know as being Seenu. It makes Seenu village real to them. And that's something that now it will be interesting to see what happens next with this. One part of this is the storytelling. And this is, I think, how storytelling is an amazing way of engaging students in this idea of experiencing authenticity. It's about kind of creating their own experience of a place through listening to and reliving the experiences of someone else. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to play this clip of Paniotis Lopas, and he's telling a great story. He tells it very well about a village of Seenu. I should tell you that Paniotis grew up in Seenu from the ages of 2 until probably around 8 or 9. And so he's showing the students around his house, basically. It's fallen down, and he's telling these stories. So I'll just play this clip. Or not. Could be it's not that. I don't know. No, sorry.
που δάμε βλέπετε θάλασσα. Δάμε έκτισε ο κύριος μου έναν τοίχο και πήγε μέχρι και κάτω. Μέχρι για μένα. Η πόρτα δεν ήταν μέσα στο κέντρο. Δάμε ήταν τοίχος. Φανταστείτε πόσος χώρος εν τούτος δάμε να έχουμε την νησιά για με που στέκει η κοπέλα μες στη γωνιά, όχι μάλλον για με, και να μην íσκουμε 6 παιδιά δαμε, να μην íσκει ο γάρος για με, και ο κύριος μου δαμε, έδες τρύπες δαμε, έβαλε ένα ξύλο για με, ένα ξύλο παραδά, και έβαλε πάνω τα σαρκιά και πέφτε δαμε, και δαμε τέλεια ο γάρος ήταν κοντά του. Και εμείς πέφταμε δαμε. Το τραπέζι μας, ο τσέστος, εκρεμάζαμε το τζαμέ και ο τενεκές έβαλαμε τον που κάτω την τάβλα που έπεφτε ο κύριος μου την καρκόλα του. Λοιπόν, δεν είχε κανένα άλλο παραθύρι, μόνο μια πόρτα. Όταν χρειαζόμαστε τίποτε που μας έλειπε, δεν είχαμε άλλας, δεν είχαμε λάδι, δεν είχαμε ξύδι, τούτον ήταν το παραθύρι που συγκοινωνούσαμε με το άλλο σπίτι και φωνάζαμε που δαμε τούτην, εκείνη, το σπίτι κοιτώνισσα, ελαλούσαν την Παναγιωτού. Και Παναγιωτού, είσαι σω, ναι, δώσ' μας λιονάδας. Έβαντα μας λιονάδας, έβαντα μας το φαΐ. Εκείνοι που έτσι φωνάζαν κάποτε δεν είχε ξύδι. Εφώναζαν της μάνας μου που δάει η μάνα μου όσαν τη Θεκλούνε πέθανε. Κόρη μου, Θεκλού, δώσ' μου λίγο ξύδι. Ήταν το παραθύρι που συγκοινωνούσαμε. Δεν είχε αλλού παραθύρι με τίποτε.
So it was through that experience that made Seenu really real to those students. So this idea of kind of connecting with places to bring you back or to connect you into the distant past is one thing, but there's also practices that can do this. And I found one of the things that I asked the villagers, what do you want to show me? What do you want to have videotaped? And one of the first things that the women's group said was pitas. We want to show you how to make pitas. And so they did. But what I learned through this experience was that, in fact, making pitas and sharing pitas was and is a very important part of connecting with people. It's actually a way of connecting people through the actual physical making of pitas. It was hot. There was a short little clip I will show you. No one looks like they're sweating, but it's very hot, and yet everyone's talking and visiting, and it's a very social thing to do. So the making of them is social. And on the other side, you also have the social part of sharing them afterwards, which is kind of, it seems to me, part of the requirement of making pitas. You have to share them afterwards. So it's this continuity of practice through time, through making something like pitas. So in this case, pitas aren't made all the time, but they're quite frequently made. So again, it's connecting people through time, through this practice. Okay, and this is just a quick clip of...
Κάθε κοπέλα που βοήθησε εδώ που τις κάναμε τις πίτες θα πάρει στο σπίτι, να φάει και η υπόλοιπη οικογένεια. Θα πάρουμε στον κοινοτάρχη, διότι δεν μπορούσε να παρευρεθεί και ζήτησε να το πάρουμε στο σπίτι του.
Και στον παππούν τον Ανδρέα που μας έδωσε το αλεύρι.
Ναι, και στον παππούν τον Ανδρέα που μας έδωσε τον αλεύρι. Αυτά.
Παντού βασικά.
Ναι.
Σχεδόν όλο τον Ιτσιτάλ.
Μπράβο.
Έτσι.
Yes, so it doesn't always, it can be practices like making pitas. I'm getting better at them, by the way, slowly, slowly. Another thing, people talk about objects and how it's objects that through contact with them, through remaking them, that you can transcend, that they transcend time. They have this ability to connect you with the past. But it's actually not just objects. And in this example, it was through several times going to the olive trees with Eleni. When we went to see her fields, Eleni would start talking about family. And at first we didn't really notice it that much. But in fact, it was taking care of the olives for her. It was very much like taking care of her family. I'll give you some examples. So when she goes to the olive trees are just up the road from where she lives, and so she goes to the olives every day. So she waters them, she prunes them. Now she's collecting the olives, and in doing this, when she goes to see them, she knows this is the olive tree that I planted with my father. These are the olive trees that are from my grandfather. There's a connection. There's no separation between those olive trees and her own identity and the identity of her family. And even the appearance of a tree, if you see an olive tree that's been pruned and coppiced through time, it has this amazing appearance to it. And it's this long-term care that's given to it, which is really, really important. So in fact, the biography of Eleni's story is very much tied up in these trees, and you can tell that when she walks through the trees, she's touching them, she's holding them, she hangs onto the olives they're precious to her. And as most times, I ask stupid questions as part and parcel. And I asked her when I was taking some pictures of these olive trees, and I said to Eleni, "Is there an olive tree that you want me that you would like me to take a picture of you in front of? Do you have a favorite olive tree?" And she turned to me and said, "No, of course, these are like children. You would never have a favorite olive tree. I love them all the same." And so there is this aspect. So going to the olive trees is very much about family to her. And there's that connection, which is very important. In fact, before I left, she told me to go and take a picture. There was a view of olive trees. She said, "You have to take this picture," because she wanted to send this picture of these olive trees to her sister who lives in Canada. And she said, I need to make sure that my sister sees her olive trees. That's very important. She'll be very happy to see them. So on one level, it's a practical ownership. On another level, it's a very much more of a social and cultural engagement with these things that do take her, especially, back to connecting with her family and generations of her family. One of the parts of the project was asking people in the village to take some photographs. And this is part of a photo voice project that we ran. So I gave cameras to people who wanted to participate, and I asked them, take pictures of those things that are meaningful for you. And they came back with all sorts of different pictures. There were some pictures, and we can see here.
You have to use the pointer because we can't see when you use the mouse.
Oh, you can't see? Oh. Okay.
Yeah, you have to use
the pointer. Yes, I have to use this one. Okay. Right. So this picture here, I wanted to keep the, it's low quality, but it was important because it was one of the images that was actually posted on the wall. So this is from Antigone. And she chose a picture of a telephone booth in the village. And part of this process was taking the image, so going out and taking pictures of what's important, coming back, printing them, and then sorting them out, and then creating captions for them. So it's a big process. It's a much bigger process. And it's actually that process which is part of this heritage making process. It's about kind of connecting to these places and showing them in a different way. So Antigone, put my glasses on so I can see. The telephone booth was important to her because it was a place where she called her father. It was a place that she called her aunties, and it was significant to her. To Yanula, the place that these pictures belong to is, again, this is a Seenu village. This is a place that was important to her. And so the caption she produced was, "This was the house I grew up in a Seenu, which I inherited from my parents, Savas and Sofia Muduru, from their grandparents." Okay, so it's the whole history of it. So in a way, by doing this, it's not just about the process of heritage making, but in fact, and there's some literature on this, about the photographs themselves become almost artifacts. They become objects that you can look at, you can handle, you can and engage again with the past, whether it's recent or distant. So they take on a different meaning. One of the interesting things is part of the again the final part of the project this summer was having an exhibition. And at this exhibition, there was the posting of photographs, and then there was maps that people had made, as well as videos. And I want to kind of highlight this one. You can see Niovi's face. People were ecstatic about seeing themselves, about seeing their pictures, about and in a way it's almost that there was a new dimension of significance that emerged through showing these images, through posting them. And I want to this final clip is from the exhibition, and it shows people going around and talking to each other. And one of the things that I'm curious about, and maybe, again, this is something that I'm just now trying to explore a bit more, is what actually happens when this medium changes, when it comes from, on one hand, you have the experience of going out and taking the picture. You come back, you have that picture to look at, you can connect with it, you can show it to the person next to you. But then when you put it on the wall and you have other people look at it, what happens? There's a certain sense of vindication or validation through having other people look at it. And I think that's an important part of this. At the same level, you have the whole socialization. And I think this is something that we often overlook, that heritage making, that this seeing the significance of whether it's objects or practices isn't done in isolation. It's very much about connections amongst people. It's about the socialization, it's about the conversation, it's about the dialogue that takes place. And I think you'll get a taste of that in this clip.
la luce ieri, sputam dipla, doamna ce putam fi să te strade, ce mo pensa? Ce potamo, da deve negato, ce extra, deve mi spaloni, che ma si chiama il chat pure postolo Andrea Mondaloni. Candaloni, ci do lo spedimo, spiazzo ya, non ce lo vuole. Ci si la caspita che come si sto però non lo come. Ci io niente, quello che vuole spicchia.
So the pictures themselves and the videos become almost artifacts in and of themselves. They have this ability to kind of transcend time, and I'm wondering whether or not the reaction to them is because people are they're putting themselves into the narrative of that place. You are becoming part of it through seeing yourself in a video or of the pictures that you took. So, just to conclude, in this presentation, I've talked a bit about some of the work that I've kind of taken bits and pieces of the work that I've been doing in the village of Nikki, Tari, and been looking at how the different practices that take place in terms of heritage work, the work that is done, whether it happens to be on a daily basis, with watering olive trees, the connections that are made to family as you go to that place, through practices like making pithes, or something like the Seenu primary school and their desire to connect to an abandoned village in order to give a sense of identity to the school itself. I think the whole social aspect of this, the fact that these practices aren't done in isolation, is informative when we start to think about heritage, and the power of heritage and the power of heritage places and objects. And in a lot of the work that I've been doing, I've really been, it's been highlighted to me that it's more about the activities. It's not so much about the things themselves, but it's about how they're mobilized by people, how they become part of broader, larger activities. So like visiting a Seenu village, it's not the village itself that's important, but it's the activities around that, it's the social aspect of that. As I spoke of before. So the project continues. The group, the Photo Voice group, have decided to make a calendar, I believe, that will highlight those places in the village that are not often seen, so the more invisible places within the village, which is, again, part of this work of heritage. I would suggest that it's about making those things visible that haven't been before. And the Seenu primary school hopes to create a research project. So the students of the school will start talking to people who grew up in a Seenu village, and try to get them engaged in actually the physical work of collecting that information, rather than having it just come from the outside, from somebody like me. So I think these are really positive outcomes in terms of what of the project in general, and I'll be very interested to see what happens in the future. I'm very much open to any comments and queries you may have, and suggestions that came up through this presentation. It is a bit of a work in progress in terms of the work, and so any ideas you have would be welcome. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Erin, for sharing with us some of the results of your ongoing work. It's been really fascinating, at least to me, and I'm sure for all of our audience tonight. It was also very nice for me to see, in a way, the continuation of the TAS project, as you've been inspired from it. A truly interdisciplinary project that some of my colleagues and friends were involved, also yourself. And before asking the audience to address questions as you requested, and comments and suggestions, I feel like I should thank you on behalf of everyone here for engaging with the local community in the way you did. Unlike 19th, 20th century anthropologists, you were actually part of it rather than a foreigner, despite the language barrier as well, towards an alien species, actually. Ευχαριστήσαμε την Erin για την διάλεξη της απόψε, οπότε αν υπάρχουν σχόλια και ερωτήσεις, είναι πρόθυμη να τις δεχτεί και να μιλήσει μαζί σας, είτε στα ελληνικά είτε στα αγγλικά. So if there is any questions, comments or suggestions on Erin's work, please do ask.
Σαν πρόεδρος της κοινότητας του Τari, θα ήθελαμε να ευχαριστήσουμε την κυρία Erin, που από όλη την Κύπρο έχει διαλέξει τον Τari για να δει τι το παρελθόν με το μέλλον. Για μας ήταν κάτι πρωτόγνωρο, και να έρθει κάποια κοπέλα ξένη στο χωριό μας με τόσο ζήλο και με τόσο πάθος να δουλέψει μαζί μας, με τις γυναίκες, με τα παιδιά, με τον κόσμο όλο. Πραγματικά συγκινηθήκαμε πάρα πολύ που μια κοπέλα ξένη ήρθε να μείνει στο χωριό μας ένα μήνα, να δουλέψει στα βουνά, στις εκκλησίες, στο χωριό. Και έτσι και θέλαμε να την ευχαριστήσουμε και χαρήκαμε που γνωρίσαμε αυτήν την υπέροχη γυναίκα που είναι και ντόκτορ της αρχαιολογίας. Σε ευχαριστούμε πάρα πολύ.
I got enough.
So, άλλες ερωτήσεις ή σχόλια? Ναι, όπως μας είπε η Erin, θα συνεχιστεί. The project is going to continue on the same kind of topic or something different. You mentioned about the schools, the school project.
Yes, exactly.
Say a bit more?
Yes, so the best part, I mean, my aim, I know when this project is successful, when the village and the schools can do everything without me. And so it will, I think, take a little time, but I hope to be there to help facilitate. I think the village, the people in Nikki Tari have wonderful ideas of what they want to do. They just need perhaps a little bit of coaxing, and so I hope that I will have connections with Nikki Tari forever. Whether or not that research is going to be paid, I don't know. We'll see. But,
In a more, let's say, concrete result. What would be the result of your project? And as after 2 years, what do you hope to come out? What will you present as the end result of these 2 years of research?
Yeah. In terms of the, what do they call them, deliverables, isn't it? Awful word. I think one of the aims of the project is to investigate how heritage is created. What are the processes involved in heritage construction? And so that's something that I'm certainly learning a lot about through that. In terms of an outcome for the community itself, it may just be smaller things, like a calendar that they will take on. It may be they're thinking of a picture book based on with stories. So I mean, some of for me, my deliverables are very much based on both the theoretical aspect of it. So how is heritage constructed? What does that mean, and what does that look like? And what can we learn from that in order to go forward with different archaeological projects? Different ways. I've learned a lot about connections, contemporary, it's almost ethnographic work, and how you can use that information, or how the information might be applicable to looking at the past, archaeological past. So how is it that we can take some of these ideas and apply them to the past? So the usual, for deliverables, it's the usual articles and things like that on one side, but then in terms of the village component, it's really whatever that they want to construct. I will help facilitate that if I can. Yeah. Yep.
Thank you very much. This was really fascinating. It's just my question has to do about not just the process of constructing the heritage, but of transmitting it. For example, does Mrs. Eleni go with her daughter or granddaughter to take care of the olives? Or because you talk about primary school children, and then the teenagers and the youths, where are they in this kind of, because they were not there.
Yes,
so,
yeah.
So, I mean, there is this, you construct the heritage, you connect to the past because you want to also connect to the future. So how do you take are you going to look at this at all? Or
I mean, I think it's a big challenge. One of the reasons why I wanted to do this project is because there is, and this is something that the mayor highlighted, Kyriakos highlighted the fact that he is concerned because young people are leaving the village. And is there a way, and so when I came to this project I thought, well, is there a way of creating something that will, it's not so much that the heritage projects themselves, that the photo voice, that all these different things are about creating a product. It's about creating a process and creating a community. And I think, hopefully I can quote Antigone, she doesn't mind, but I think one of the most positive things to me was at the end of the last meeting, and it was Antigone was driving away, and she said to me, she said, "Thank you for the work, because I didn't really know the other ladies in the community very well. I was a bit nervous about being around them." And so it created a sense of community. And I think it's that sense of community. I think that's the value of it. It's not so much about creating a calendar or things like that, or even an archive. I mean, so the work, the data that I collect will be put into an archive for the village to use as they wish. But to me, it's not so much the things, it's not so much that's important, it's what it does. What does this sharing actually do in the community? Because there is this absence. I mean, I think the students that in the field trip that went to a Seenu village, I think they will have a connection, or they'll at least have an experience. They'll know where it is. But there's a lot of people in the village of Nikki Tari and neighboring villages that haven't been to a Seenu. And so it's, it is an issue. So how is that being communicated? Does anyone from the village want to respond to that? You're welcome to respond to any of these questions, because it's not really my data, really. So, but yeah, thank you. That's a really good question, though. Mm-hmm.
What occurred to me, I found it particularly interesting, is the way that what you described as drawings or videos becoming objects. That was particularly interesting, because these are words and memories put onto paper, onto a film, and become like these are mnemes, memories becoming mnemia, monuments in a way. This is I found it a very attractive way of actually not only engaging the community, but also preserving or reviving those memories that they're going to be gone after that particular generation is going to be gone. Also considering the fact that Cyprus is one of these places that people are really attached to the land, to the place.
Yes.
They have a strong identity of belonging to a place. I was wondering, I mean, also for people, I believe, engaged with later periods, like the Middle Ages and later, it is very interesting to that what you showed, how people felt about the abandoned village of Tari, which is fairly straightforward and logical, because this is the closest, oldest settlement that they can recall. Being there physically and touching the material remains that will probably no longer exist in 10 years' time, because they're already in ruins, is in a way reviving these memories and passing them on to the next generation. So I was wondering, since Nikki Tari, I believe, I correct me if I'm wrong, there is not many or any refugees living in Nikki Tari, right? They're all from
I don't think
villages.
so. I'll ask Kyriakos.
Right. So I was wondering whether you actually got any response or any sense of how they felt about their more ancient past and the cultural heritage that does exist in the nearby area, the nearby landscape, the immediate landscape, in terms of ancient ruins, medieval churches, working in Kofino, in the Xeros, where people there are actually all of them are refugees. What we saw, which is particularly interesting, and I believe it does happen a lot in Cyprus, there is no sense of belonging to that place.
Right.
So all of it is foreign to them.
Yeah.
They don't care so much about the cultural heritage. What was your experience, or working with people like that? They traditionally come from this place or surrounding areas, in terms of the ruins or monuments of the past age.
Yeah, great question. I think there's two different parts to it. On one level, there's people are connected to the churches, and to Pania Forviotis is very important, as well as the Apostolos Andreas and the other churches in the area. At the same time, even though the people grew up on that landscape for the most part, there is a sense of a lot of people that now live in Nikki Tari came from other villages. Part of this is related to when the forest was created by the British. So places like Seenu village, there's a lot of villages within the forest where people like Paniotis used to live. When the forest was demarcated and they had to leave because they were goat herders, when that happened, it's like the memory of the use of that landscape went with it. And I think this is something that I would like to really address further is the fact that it seems that the forest is still being, in a way, colonized because there is an absence of understanding of the forest. There is a lack of connection. It's that connection with the forest that existed because of goat herding, I think, and people living in the forest and using its resources was severed with the British when they were, and I think it was in 1940s that they were really not allowed in, even though resistance continued for a long time. I think that broke the memory of the using the place. And so the forest is a place you go for picnics, maybe. My experience is most people, Panagiotis is an unusual person because he has a more detailed knowledge of the forest than many people from my experience. But I think for the most part, people just, they haven't been to a Seenu. They don't necessarily know it's there. It's like this part of this, the memory has been really erased. And I think so, and because of that, people came from Spilia, they came from other villages to settle, because again, they were using the forest as well, and they kind of settled in Nikki, Tari. So there may be some people that have been there really long term, but I think a lot of them, again, were kind of ousted. In a way, they're refugees in a different sense. But again, I think it's really the forest boundary that's really altered people's connection to the forest anyway. I think. Yeah. Yes.
I'd like to congratulate for your work. As you know, heritage and tradition is alive inside. And I do believe that it will remain alive as long as the bearers, the people who carry on, find that it has a meaning for them. What you're doing with your work is to make the invisible visible, to uncover and bring to light this meaning that is hidden behind all these. And of course, people live their life, everyday life, unconsciously. I mean, they do all these things,
Yes.
and now you point to them. This is important what you do. You have a connection with your old village, with your old school, and this storytelling helps very much to the social cohesion, which is very, very important for the community. Your work is actually the intangible heritage. This is what you study, and it's very important. And Maria pointed out the transmission. The children were there, and they listened to the stories, so they will remember something. They will continue. They will go back to the abandoned village, or to the church, or to the river, whatever it is. So I think it's very important what you're doing with involving all these people. And we do thank you about it.
Oh, thank you very much. Yes.
Before I make my remark, I would like to point out that my background has nothing to do with archaeology or with background. I was extremely interested from what you've done. I just want to highlight one part of the presentation, that a wall in the ruined, which was a part of the ruined village, became alive through a story. It was supported by a few words. And I saw people around that wall living and interacting. But then many more questions were raised in my mind that they needed answers. For example, was that hole, which was the connection between the two houses, made intentionally? Was there one family, and then there were two sisters who got married, and that was, I wanted to know more about that. So I wanted more storytelling to bring alive not that just war, but the whole village, and that would be very interesting for visitors to through somebody who can tell them the real life. It's not mythology, it's the real life. To bring back into life such interesting things and finding. Of
I
course,
agree.
the storyteller, as well as the walls, they have an expiry date. So possibly through work like yours will be retained through books, tapes, videos, which are very interesting for people at least of my age. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it's interesting.
Yes. May I suggest you another aspect that cannot be included in storytelling. This aspect is the past that lives now in the present. For example, in the way that people behave and move in a house, in the way that people behave and circulate in their village, in the way that people treat the soil, treat the water of their village, treat their fountains, their wood, their air, and how they are moving, even if in a dance, even if in a marriage, even just the everyday route from school or to a pathway or to a field they plant a tomato, whatever. I don't know, this cannot be described in storytelling. Maybe you find an instrument, a tool, how this can be described, even in diagrams, even in art. This is another option.
Yes, I think that's, yeah, I think with a lot of these things, it's about bringing things together, isn't it? There are different ways of knowing, you know, so you can know something through storytelling, you can know things through archaeological practice, you can know things. I tried to take videos as people were describing things, as they're doing practices, whatever happens to be. And again, that adds another layer. I think in the end, for me, this actually goes back to Lena's question, is I want to create some kind of it's going to be a map with different parts on it, different overlaying, and because that's how I see this. It's really just a collage. It's not just one layer, and it's really through looking through it all that you start to get some kind of understanding. So it's piecing these pieces together. But that's a good point. Thank you.
By listening to the lecture tonight, it has just occurred to me that maybe your work goes even further. That is, maybe it constitutes the spark needed. That people in the area start going back to their old village, as it. Who knows? With some courageous people in the beginning, they can go back. God stops them.
Exactly. I think that's the most important thing. I mean, with the project, is it opens up possibilities, or there's questions that maybe are there now that weren't there before. And if that's the case, then I know that it worked. Yeah.
Right. I believe that concludes your presentation tonight.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you.